Welcome back to Johnny Reads. And so today, if you're new here, I'm going to be talking about a book that I read recently that is from the list of Amazon's 100 books that everyone should read in their lifetime. And so if you're unfamiliar completely, basically Amazon, the editors at Amazon Books, they released a list, probably I would say 5-6 years ago, something like that. And ever since then, I've been slowly working my way through the list. This year, I've actually read quite a few of them, and typically, I would have made videos for every one of the books that I read. This year, because at the beginning of the year, I just wasn't active on the channel, so I wasn't doing that. But this most recent book, which was the 30th book that I've read this year, it was one of those books, and so I wanted to go ahead and make a video about it. And so the book that we're going to be talking about today is It's a Long Way Gone by Ishmael Bey. Essentially what the book's about. So Ishmael, he's a regular kid in Sierra Leone. This is going to be at the very end of the 20th century. And, he likes hanging out with his friends, likes American rap music. He takes part in these talent shows to kind of show off his dancing ability. Like, he's really just a regular kid, as you would think of. Whatever country that you might be living in. And so he's a regular kid until the Sierra Leone Civil War breaks out and pretty much takes over the entire country. And the war lasts for more than a decade, up over into the 21st century. And so the problem, though, that he faced was essentially when the war really started hitting home for him in terms of like where he was at the time in terms of living, is he was faced with a choice. He could either become a soldier, and again, he was a kid. I think when it first really got going, he was 12, but he may have been 13, right in that age though. He was faced with the decision of, as I mentioned, becoming a soldier or dying. That was it. I mean, it sounds like no, that wasn't the decision he had to make, but it really was, because that's just the way it was in that country. And so the very first thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the book and the story, and I hate to say this almost, but this was the first thing that I noticed literally like 2-3 pages in, is that the writing style, and I guess the more appropriate term would be writing ability, it's not that great. And so what I mean is, when you read a book by your favorite author, it doesn't matter who it is, but one of your favorite authors, heck, you can even talk about James Patterson. Regardless of the quality of the actual story, the writing itself is perfect. The language is perfect. Everything is perfect. I had a college professor tell me that I took like 4 times when I was in school. He said that if you read, I think he said 50 books a year, that your writing will be so much better because you're constantly exposing yourself to this perfect use of language and the written word. And so I know that Ishmael now, he's literally an author. I think he's published like 3 or 4 books. I don't know how many. And so I'm sure that his more recent work is probably better. One of the other things that I really found intriguing and really made me want to keep reading was how honest he was. Like, so he was fighting in the war for years. Again, it lasted more than a decade. Himself, he wasn't the full decade, but he was fighting for multiple years. And it would be easy to kind of, I don't want to say skip over those years. I think it would be easy for him to have kind of maybe went over them pretty quickly and then talked about, rehabilitation and what happened afterward. Because that would be where you, as a reader, you might think, oh man, he did all these things, all these brutal things. But now he's become a productive, member of society. But he didn't. Most of the book is going to be about the war years, or maybe not most of it, but a lot of it. And he literally tells you about executing prisoners. He tells you about raiding villages and killing pretty much indiscriminately. He tells you about doing drugs almost every single night. And he doesn't really beat around the bush or try to minimize what he did. Like, he's honest with what he did and why he did it at the time. And that's crazy. It's hard to read sometimes. Because, again, this was a kid who had to do these just awful things in order to stay alive. Last thing I wanted to talk about was what I found to be the most, I would say, impressive part of the story was every time he would talk about his family. And so at the beginning of the war, maybe not at the beginning of the war, but at the beginning of the war for him, his family, they weren't killed immediately, but later on they were all killed. And that's going to be his parents, sibling, everybody. And so it was just him. And there were a lot of times during the course of the book when he tells you about some of the nightmares that he had, when he tells you about some of the thoughts that he had in terms of how come I'm the one who was able to stay alive or has not been killed. And to me, and later on with his adopted family, with his uncle, I feel like that was when he was at his best. When he was telling you about his family, telling you about those thoughts that he was having, because those are thoughts that when you or I or anybody thinks about having to pick up arms and essentially defend the country against your neighbors, almost, that's hard for us to, I mean, I can only speak for myself, of course, but that's hard to really come to grips with. But when you think of these thoughts of, how come I'm the only one who made it, or why is this happening to my family, like, I think those thoughts are ones that we can all relate to, because we've all experienced loss, probably not on this level or in this way, but we've all experienced loss, especially when it comes to our family. But that's all I have. So as I mentioned, this was the 30th book that I've read this year. It was really good. When I was rating it on Goodreads, because again, I always rate them, I was stuck between 3 stars and 4 stars. And it wasn't because of the content or the story. It was because of the writing style. Again, I hate to harp on that. But so I ultimately went lower. I went with 3 stars. As I mentioned, my 30th book of the year. And this was actually my second memoir, and I think I have more scheduled, or not scheduled, but more that I'm going to be reading this year, which memoirs are not my forte, but they've both been pretty good. And I am very curious to know if you've read this, or if you haven't, if you know anything about the war, because again, with the Sierra Leone Civil War that took place at the turn of the century, I didn't know anything about it going in. But this was pretty eye-opening, and I am very curious, as I mentioned, to see or to hear what you may have thought about this book if you've read it. But I will see you next time.